This meeting come to order. This is the regular city council meeting for Tuesday, February 20th, 2018. All four members are present, lacking one special election coming up in 1 month. So everybody get out and vote. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The council is going to remain standing for a moment for prayer. If you're willing to join us, please do. Thank you. You may be seated. Item number 1 on the agenda is the special presentation, oath of office for firefighter Kyle Garofalo. Kyle, will you meet me up at the podium? Okay, it's on. Well, first, Kyle's going to be our newest member of the Tega Fire Department. Congratulations for volunteering to do that for us. We really appreciate it, and I hope you stay a long time here. We need good firefighters. And without any further ado, let's do your oath. I have 2. You sign one before you leave. Okay, raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Kyle Garofalo,
Do solemnly swear
swear
that I am duly qualified,
that I am duly qualified,
according to the Constitution of this state,
according to the Constitution of this state,
to exercise the duties
to exercise the duties
of the office to which I have been appointed.
of the office
To which I've been
to
appointed.
which I've been appointed,
And I will,
and I will,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my abilities,
discharge the duties thereof,
discharge the duties of
and preserve,
and preserve,
protect,
protect,
and defend
and defend
the Constitution of this state
the Constitution of this state
and the United States.
and the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, firefighter.
Appreciate it.
You sign this. And then if mom or anybody wants some pictures, this is a good time to do it. And I'll belt out a little Frank Sinatra real fast while we're waiting.
You could Photoshop them out later. Not you, I was talking about Dave.
Always fun getting new people with TK, especially firefighters. Back to the glasses so I can see my desk. Okay, item number 1B, the Fort Mill School District presentation on the school bond referendum. We have Andrew, Michelle, and Kristen. Are they all here? It's just going to be Andrew.
Andrew and Michelle.
Michelle's here too. Okay.
Mayor, if I can, before Andrew gets started, just for those that are watching at home or maybe here, they do have a presentation. Unfortunately, we're having a computer issue. That presentation is already on the city's website for those that want to view it. It's on, linked off of the homepage. So,
And we do have a couple extra copies if anybody wants.
And before we go on, there's no way it'll catch up by then, so we'll go ahead and do this now? Okay, we'll just do it this way then.
Okay, so thank you for having us tonight. We appreciate the opportunity to present the information on the upcoming referendum to help build new schools and keep our school district from a capital standpoint where we need to be. So my name's Andrew Markners. I've been a resident of York County since 1988. Been a resident of the Fort Mill area since 2004. And I have 2 children in the district, a 4th grader at Doby's Bridge and a 6th grader at Banks Trail Middle School. This is Michelle Engeldorf, and she also has two children in the district and is a very involved parent as well. Kristen Vining, unfortunately, the third member of our trio, couldn't be here tonight. She's out of town on business. So with that, that's who we are. Again, we are independent folks from around the area. We're normal citizens. We don't have any special office or title. I'm here to advocate for the passage of the referendum. As you may be aware, state law prevents district employees as well as the school board from formally advocating for passage. So we establish a citizens group to try to help get information out and make people aware of why it's so important to the school district. Going on slide 3, who we are not, quite a few things here. We sort of put this slide in the presentation to try to make sure folks in their questions stay focused on what we're here to talk about. One of the people we are not is the Tega City Council, which you're very aware of. But we tried to say various issues and questions that folks may come up with related to schools or growth in the area or anything of that. Today isn't really the time for us, our part of the presentation, to talk about those items. And as those questions come up, we try to direct them to the right party, whether it be their school principal or the Tega City Council or various other folks. So we are just independent citizens who understand the importance of the referendum to the district and are trying to educate people on that. On to slide 4. There is a mandate in South Carolina that the school district has to educate folks that come in the doors, right? We have an area for the Fort Mill School District, and any student in the schooling age that presents themselves for the district, we have to educate. Some folks have said, well, we'll try to turn people away, and with the growth, there's many ways to handle it. Well, there's really not. State law says we have to educate the students. So one way or another, we have to make room for students, and we have to provide them the best education possible. On to slide to 5, and I'm going to talk for a few more slides, and then I'll let Michelle present some of the details of what's in the referendum. A brief background of school district funding. There's 2 main pots for school district in South Carolina. Number 1 is operational funds. That's where things like teacher salaries, school supplies, anything that sort of has a useful life of less than a year that comes from the school's operational budget. In 2008, the state passed a law changing the way operations are funded for schools. It was at sort of the exact wrong time for the Fort Mill School District, where we took away the property tax that funded school operations, and we added a 1-cent sales tax. For your average house in the Fort Mill area, it means you got a tax cut of around $1,500, which if you equate that to the 1% sales tax, that would mean you had to spend $150,000 on items for sales tax. I don't know about you guys, but that math just doesn't work, right? The average house that's...
You hadn't been shopping with my wife.
Oh, but so it was never going to work from a state funding standpoint. It put the entire educational system at a deficit, but it was particularly concerning for areas of high growth like Fort Mill School District. So in the past, the residential taxes would have grown with the population, whereas now that when they converted that, it stayed somewhat static. So as Fort Mill has grown from sort of 8,000 students in 2008 to 15,000 students at the start of this year, that pot of money's stayed static. And it's made Fort Mill one of the, while we do think of ourselves as one of the best school districts in the state, the best, some of the numbers will show, we do have a funding issue from an operational standpoint. So the district does a lot to try to optimize our operational dollars, including building schools that are operationally efficient, right? We make no mistake about it. We build a school to try to optimize the operational dollars that have to go into that school so that we can provide our kids the best education we can. And we'll talk about a few more things in the referendum that are based around optimizing our operational dollars in the Fort Mill School District. The one that we're here to talk about, the other bucket of money, is capital funds. And that's where we build things like schools, we buy land, we buy new and we replace technology, major maintenance, and we purchase buses. So anything that, thank you, anything that has sort of a shelf life of longer than a year, for the most part, we can buy with capital dollars. Capital dollars, though, have to be approved by the voters. So that's why we're here today, to talk about the next referendum that has these contents. And the referendum is essentially the permission for the school district to take out a mortgage for the amount of the referendum. It's not specifically how it's paid for, which we'll talk a little bit about as well. But even despite how it's going to be paid for, we still have to get approval to take out that mortgage. It's state law to make sure that districts are doing things that their constituents want. But operational funds can be used for capital purposes in the state. However, that's a big no-no in Fort Mill because of how restricted we are in terms of operational funds. Capital funds by law cannot be used for operational purposes, so we're very particular about what we're able to spend those funds for. The next slide, this is sort of a high-level view of what's in the referendum. Again, this presentation is out on both the Tega website, as well as all of these slides are on our Keep Our Schools Strong Facebook page, and we'll have our own website up to date within the next couple of days. I'm not going to go through all this detail. Michelle's going to go through this in much more detail, so we'll just keep moving. Running out of room, right? So we already have two schools in Fort Mill open, one that particularly impacts some TK residents that go to Gold Hill Elementary are frozen and are being sent to TK. We have about 80 students so far this year that have joined after the school year started and are being transferred either by their parents, dropping them off, or are being bused once they're taken to Gold Hill and bused over to TK. Same thing happens with Dobie's Bridge Elementary on the sort of opposite side of the school district, and those kids are being bused to Fort Mill Elementary. This does a number of things to the school day. Number one, people show up at the normal times on buses, and then they have to take 15, 20 minutes out of the day to get sent to the other school, and same thing at the end. So freezing has a lot of sort of negative impacts on the education that we're able to provide those children, and we'll talk more about those as well. Next up, this is the growth projections that we have for elementary schools. The next slide is the middle school version, but as you can see here, starting next year, we will be at the overall capacity for the elementary schools in the district. So growth over the past 2 to 3 years. We all know over the past 5, 6 years, growth in the Fort Mill School District has been very rapid. In the past 2 years, it's even accelerated more. So each of the past 2 school years, the district has added 1,000 students. So over the summer, year over year, 1,000 students per school year, and we don't see that slowing down anytime soon. So these are the projections at the beginning of next school year. Again, the overall elementary system will be at its capacity, so a number of schools will be over capacity. We will likely have to freeze more schools and bus more kids around different places, but this sort of illustrates the need for building those elementary schools as quickly as we can. One of the reasons we're pushing to have that we have the vote on March 20th as opposed to April or May is we really need that time to be able to get those schools open by August of 2020. If we waited even 2 months, we would put that sort of timeline in jeopardy and potentially not be able to open those schools until 2021. Next slide is the same thing for middle school. It's a little bit better story where the projections would not cross the capacity until the year that we were able to open the school. Again, middle schools and high schools are a little bit easier to keep up with the enrollment for 2 reasons. Number one, there are fewer of them. So we don't typically have to freeze them as much. It's easier to manage 5 middle schools as it is 9 elementary schools, and the same thing with the high school. But the more important impact is, in general, people move to Fort Mill to send their kids through the public school system. And we see all of the growth happening at the elementary school level, and it sort of builds up each grade, so on and so forth throughout there. So it's actually a little bit easier to judge and get middle school and high school capacities correct. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, and she will take you through the details, and then I'll be back at the end.
Thank you for letting me be here. Let us talk to you a bit about this. Our next slide is pretty impactful. Our other partner that's not here came up with our hashtag Say No to Trailers. It was just kind of a quick way to say, this is where we're headed if we can't get the bond money that we need and get the builds proposed and done. Our first two needs for elementary schools are gonna be School 10 and School 11. As you can see, elementary 10 is gonna be a little over 42 million. 11, a little over 44. The difference there is the district is going to have a satellite bus lot so that they can try to distribute the buses so they're not coming through full traffic in the morning, and maybe we can work out a better time frame. It's just we have a traffic issue. This is the way they feel they can counteract that. Middle school number 6, it's almost $54 million for a middle school. That will be billed, that will be the August 2021. But the two elementary schools, in order to get us where we need to open in 2020. As Andrew said, that puts us at a dig time of we need to start digging April 1st, the best we can. If we go to our next slide, I'm gonna break down our total bond. As we mentioned, it's $190 million. Almost there, okay. And in that, we're gonna talk about some of the things you see. Technology is a little over 20 million. These are the types of things I would ask you to think about in your homes. These are your updating your iPhones, updating your wireless connections, your computer softwares. We just saw the city seem like they were doing one of those. All of your security cameras. This 20 million is going to do upgrades across our schools, all of Fort Mill schools, the things that they have in need. When we move down to major facility maintenance, we're almost at $9 million. These again are roof replacements, HVAC, the big ticket items, some concrete, driveway cracks, cafeteria equipment replacement. This was one that as a parent just was kind of low on the totem pole. I just didn't really think about that, and we sat down and talked with them a bit, and if we're not ahead of the game and we're about to lose a freezer or refrigerator, there's $30,000 worth of food in there at any time that we could lose. So they're really trying to be proactive instead of reactive and look at what have we used in the lifespan of all of these types of things. How can we do it most cost effective, and when do we need to do it? Land. We need almost $17 million in land. So the district has what we call a couple of pots of land that they already own. They had the forethought years ago to buy some different lots. It's 25 acres to build an elementary school, and 35 for a middle, and 120 for the high school, the new high school that you see. So the idea was buy land when it was at your best pricing, so you're not being reactive again. Then you'll have it when you need it. We're getting ready to try to pull some of those that we already have. We're still looking at new ones. But the additional idea is we're going to have some future needs. So we need to pick up some land now while it's at the best pricing, because we all know it's only going to go up every year. And then the other benefit is a developer can't develop on it right now. So if the school district owns it, they know they've got the area and the space that they're going to need should that build come about. If it turns out that they don't in the future years, they can always sell the land and turn around and make it profitable. So they felt like replenishing the lots that we're going to use now made great sense. And after the study, we feel that that's almost 17 million. Transportation, we need about a little over 2 million. Those are for an additional 20 buses. As most people know, the state gave us some buses a while ago, but our understanding is those were retired buses from Kentucky. And we have a large amount of students. We're doing double loads in some cases, which change those times, as Andrew talked about. So we really need, the district felt that 20 additional buses were something that we needed to add personally, that we had to build in, that we had to get our students where they needed to be. As I said, the total bond is $190 million. Andrew's going to talk to you a little bit about how we see that bond being paid for.
Yeah, so as many of you know, the district is currently in the process of assessing a new impact fee for new homes that are built in the area. Currently, the district is one of only 2 school districts in the state that has an impact fee. It was passed in the span of about 3 months in 1999 that a law was on the books allowing them to do it. Fort Mill and one other district were the only ones that are allowed or were able to get it passed in that time. But in 2016, the state passed a new law allowing new impact fees. One of the requirements, though, is that the municipality and the folks requesting the impact fee do a very detailed study to make sure that they're matching the exact impact of those actions that we're putting a fee on, in this case, building new houses, with their true impact to, in this case, the school district. So one of the things the study is looking at is different types of properties, whether it be an apartment or a 5,000 square foot house versus a 1,200 square foot house that's built. And we expect that, that study to actually come back any day now, hopefully sometime this week. And from there, we'll take that impact assessment. So the district originally requested the impact fee be changed to $10,000 before we learned about all these new requirements with the state law. And now the district will request what the impact fee study comes back at. Based on the sort of preliminary feedback, we expect it to actually come back with a number higher than $10,000. And that's purely due to the cost of building new facilities for new students. So if you think about on average, each new house brings in 6/10 of an elementary schooler. That's not exactly possible, but that's the average. But then you have to build a facility, an elementary school facility to educate that child, and then you have to build a middle school facility, and then you have to figure out how you're going to handle them in high school as well. So the cost really does add up. You know, the impact fee could come back as much as $15,000, $18,000. But essentially the district will request the county council to approve that impact fee, and then the county council will have to go through the planning commission of the county, and then it will ultimately go to the council, which we believe is very promising. We believe that we have the support on the council. We've touched base with our councilman in our area, Michael Johnson. Have not had a chance to touch base with the other ones, but we believe the support is there to pass an increased impact fee. And if the impact fee is passed, it would pay for the entire referendum. The impact to your taxes would be zero. That's pretty simple. But regardless of that, we do have to get permission to sort of take out that mortgage. In the worst case scenario, we're trying to be very open and honest. If the impact fee, if something goes unexpected, the impact to the average home in Fort Mill would be $100 a year, right? $99 is the exact number, and the average is $250,000. So if you have a house assessed at $500,000, you can multiply that times two. So that's sort of the tax impact, and again, we strongly suspect that the impact will be zero, if not having the ability to actually lower your taxes with the impact fee. So that's sort of where we are and where we think the money is going to come to pay for it. But again, we certainly can't promise the impact fee. We can't wait for the referendum to pass until we see if the impact fee is going to pass. We have to build these schools regardless. We hope the impact fee is going to pay for them. But in the worst case scenario, it would be roughly $100 a year on your average house. Real quickly, before we get to questions, want to go through sort of what the impact would be to the district if the referendum isn't able to pass. Number one, as I talked about in the beginning, we do have to educate all of the students that come through the door. And at some point, we run out of facilities to educate them in. So the district would have to start buying trailers. At the current growth rate of 1,000 students a year, that's 40 trailers a year the district would have to find somewhere to put. They'd obviously go on existing school sites, and we would load those schools up with more students. This has a number of negative impacts on the educational process. Not only is it emotionally feel disconnected, there's plenty of studies on that, but if we don't have the referendum, we can't take out the mortgage, can't pay for it with capital dollars. Unfortunately, you have to build these trailers and purchase them with operational dollars. The trailer with all of the state requirements, each of those 40 trailers a year would be around $100,000. The average cost of a teacher in Fort Mill is around $75,000. So you're actually looking at 45, 50 teachers that the district would not be hiring every year to pay for that growth. So your class sizes would go up substantially. And we in Fort Mill believe that that's one of the strongest things that we have in being able to educate our students well. And that would directly correlate to the education that our students would be able to get. A lot of the other impacts here are really around cramming 12, 13, 1,400 students into a facility built for 1,000. Cafeteria is not getting any bigger. The gym isn't getting any bigger, so on and so forth. So we have to reduce the time that those students are allowed to have related arts. Some of the sort of contingency plans for loading a school up with that many students would mean that lunch was starting for some students at 9:30. Would go till about 1:30 in the afternoon for elementary school kids. And think about that. You'd show up for class at 7:45 and you wouldn't have lunch until 1:15, or you'd show up and you'd have lunch at 9:30 and you wouldn't have anything again until you get home at 3 o'clock, 3:30. So it really does have a huge impact. One thing that I will mention, and we've mentioned this in the entire month that we've been presenting this presentation. This is not anything new that we've been talking about, but trailers do have a safety concern as well. We in Fort Mill have done a lot of things to make sure our students are safe. We have very secure facilities. That's not to say that they're impenetrable. I don't think anything really is. But trailers themselves are sort of out on an island, right? They are, from a security and safety standpoint, a challenge. So that's something that we have, like I said, this isn't something we started saying this week because of recent events, but it is a safety challenge. In addition, the other things we haven't mentioned, smaller, older buses and outdated technology. So if we're not able to replace technology, we just stop using it when it goes bad, or we, again, hire less teachers to be able to use those operational dollars for capital funds. So in Fort Mill, the community has been very supportive in the past of the referendums. I think in general, the reason I moved from Rock Hill to Fort Mill was because of the schools. I knew I was going to be having kids, and as soon as I graduated from college, I moved to Fort Mill because that's where I wanted to raise my family. And I think that's what a lot of the citizens have done, and I think we hope to have continued support of the citizens. So the last thing I'll leave you with before we go to questions, the last referendum in 2015 was what I would call uncomfortably close. So it had about 3,500 people vote for it, around 3,000 people vote against it. Now, I did just mention at the beginning of the presentation we have 15,000 students in the district, so it's a little bit disappointing in the number of people that actively go vote. So that's one of the things that we are focusing on, is just trying to get the story out, the impact, what is in it, but then also trying to remind people to go vote for everybody but Tega K. It's the only thing on the ballot, so hopefully the Tega K City Council election will help us get people out to vote as well. So with that, that's all we had, all of our prepared remarks. We have a lot of detail that we can go into, a lot of area, and answer any of your questions. I know in the past we've received sort of personal support from a number of the council members from both Fort Mill and Tega K, and we do ask for your support in any way that we can, whether or not you'd entertain a resolution to formally support it or not. That's obviously up to you, but here to answer any questions you may have on anything sort of referendum related, schools related. There may be some questions that we'd have to refer you to some district personnel for, but
Anybody have any questions?
Just real quick, because I could remember in February 2015 when it was that close, and just, being a parent with children in school, like, who's your biggest adversaries? Just because I'm kind of clueless on how it could be that close, because we all move here for the benefits of, this great education that our kids get to reap without paying for private school. Who's your biggest adversary, and who are the people that we need to focus on to say, hey, let's have a conversation about why this is good for Fort Mill School District?
yeah, so I think there's two things that made that one so close, and I can talk a little bit about the sort of counter arguments to the referendum. We did, have fairly big voter apathy as a sort of area and really country during that time. So, there were, I think, 45,000 registered voters and only 6,500 people showed up. I think with, we've certainly had a sort of shift in the number of people showing up to vote, so we hope that will help us But the biggest argument against the referendum, and really the only one mainly that we heard, in 2015, there were some people that were opposed to the district building an aquatic center. And that was sort of the minor opposition. But, you know, not to go back on that one, but they did have a problem where we were going to have to stop our swim programs if we weren't able to do that, with Springs closing down the complex and adding a third high school. So the district has sort of recently entered into an agreement with both the the town of Fort Mill, excuse me, and the YMCA, where Springs is going to turn that over, and they're using some of that money to add on and have that facility that the high school swim teams can participate in. But the other real opposition has been, let's vote no to make a statement against growth, try to slow growth down. You know, that really is the main argument that we've heard for this referendum. But one thing I would point out to that argument is, if you go back to, we sort of breezed through it, but this slide, there's around 20,000 homes in the Fort Mill School District right now, right? There's around 11,000 homes that have been approved to build, right? That means for you and your neighbor, think about just plopping a house right in between. Right, I mean, that many homes, 50% growth in terms of homes has been approved, right? And there's no stopping that. It's been approved. You can argue with, it shouldn't have been approved, we should have done this, we should have done that. That's in the past, right? Those have been approved. There's no changing it. The district has to educate those kids, right? They're inherently going to have kids that come in based on those approved houses. And if we don't build the facilities to keep them up, the education that our students get, unfortunately, is going to go downhill fast, right? I mean, you can sort of run the numbers, and your average student-teacher ratio in the span of sort of 2 years is going to go from 21 to 26, 27, right? That's because we got to add a trailer. That's a teacher you didn't hire, right? And gotta replace a limited amount of technology. You know, one of the reasons that we're replacing technology is most of the testing, state testing, is done online now, right? So whenever testing is done in a facility, all of the devices in that school are being used for testing grades 1 and 2, and then we rotate and we test grades 3 and 4, so on and so forth. So yeah, we really have no choice but to build places for students to go. If we don't get the referendum, it will be trailers that have to come out of operational dollars, which means we're going to have significantly higher student-teacher ratios. So it really, when you get down into the detail, would be devastating for the education that we're able to provide our kids. But that's sort of my.
And you're saying your average home is a little over $8 a month, on
Yes.
average?
Yeah, assessed, yeah. So it's nowadays probably one trip to Starbucks a month, but.
So, thank you so much, Andrew and Michelle, for coming and sharing this information with us. It's really important, and I appreciate being educated in this area. So I do have a question. In regards to, you know, you talked about 2 pots of money, you've got your operating, you've got your capital. So if we do have this $190 million investment in the capital side, how are we ensuring that we'll have the operating funds to continue operating these facilities?
Yeah, so we do have a limited amount of dollars. So one slide I'll point you to real quick is sort of in the appendix of our presentation. And it's kind of eye-opening when you get to it. And again, there's some, we also got appendix slides for people to ask, well, is Fort Mill really that good? Well, yeah, they are. You can look through the slides. But this one's kind of eye-opening as well. I think there's a general feeling that Fort Mill is a very prosperous area, which it is. I think we have, you know, very nice homes. We've done very well in terms of home values and so on and so forth. But I think in general, people think the schools have a lot of money, right? And from a capital standpoint, we've had to build a lot of schools, and a lot of money goes to pay for those schools. But in terms of operations, the Fort Mill School District, out of 83 districts in the state, is number 79 in terms of dollars per student, right? And that's just a fact. If we had even what Lancaster has per student, we could hire 150 teachers tomorrow. if we had what our most comparable district, either Clover or Lexington there, if we had their dollars per student, we could hire 500 teachers tomorrow, right? Fort Mill only has about 1,100 teachers in the district, right? I mean, Fort Mill is very good at operating on a very limited operational budget. Now, having said that, the total operational dollars per student does stay fairly consistent. So as new students come, we do have more dollars to pay for the teacher that they have, to pay for the administration that goes in those schools, so on and so forth. But we are very limited, and this sort of goes to show why we focus so much on making sure from an operational standpoint we are efficient as possible. There's also a slide out on the district website if you've heard Patrick White's presentation on sort of the operational funding crisis of the district. The district is I think second from the bottom in terms of leadership per student, right? We spend the second fewest dollars in the state on leadership, be it administration in a school, a principal, assistant principal, all the way up to the district office. Second to last in the state. So we are very careful with our operational dollars, but really because we have to be. But the sort of student funding per student we do get more money from the state as we get more students. It's just that money is not as much as it should be or would have been. I think Act 388 now is up to costing the district around $25 million per year. If Act 388 never happened and residential property taxes stayed flat, not increased, but stayed flat, the district would have about $25 million more a year. That's on an operational budget of $116 million. So about 20% more per year. But, so yes, we do have very specific plans from an operational standpoint to make sure we have the monies to operate those facilities, back to your question. You know, the district, I don't know if you've met Leanne Lordo, the CFO of the district, but she is very exceptional at her job. She does an incredibly good job of making sure that the district is in an incredibly good financial standpoint, not just from an operational standpoint, but also in terms of bond ratings and other things. The district has one of the best bond ratings in the state, despite our very large amount of outstanding debt. The district does a very good job overall managing, both from an operational standpoint and an overall capital standpoint, that we have the dollars to hire a principal to go in the new schools, so on and so forth. So.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
I just had a quick one. We're one of the few growth districts in the state. And so what are the other few that are out there doing? Are they going down the bond referendum trail as well?
Yep. So there's really no other option. So Greenville is building schools. Lexington is building schools. Clover, I think the last school they built, they didn't have a referendum because Clover has something we all know as the Catawba Nuclear Plant, which is a commercial property that still does get operational dollars. So Clover does not have an operational problem. And I think the last school they built was actually using operational dollars. Again, it's very different by district and different scenarios, but yes, most of them, due to the funding problems on an operational standpoint, have no choice but to pass referendums to build new schools.
Anybody else? Well, Andrew and Michelle, thank you very much for your time. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much. Thank you. Thanks. Good luck.
All right, item number 2 is public comments. We have 2 people signed up for public comments. Jason, want to go first? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jason Dayton from 369 Shoreline Parkway. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the fencing ordinance that you're going to be discussing later today. And my side of the issue is very simple, so I'd like to use the start of my time to discuss some of the objections or other concerns that have been brought up in this course of this discussion over the past few months. First, there were some concerns about if we pass this new fencing code, are people going to be do-it-yourselfers and build all kind of crazy fences up and down the yard? Are they going to paint it crazy colors? Those type of concerns. And the reply to that is, there's nothing in the changes that you're making today or in this code that would be materially different from what is already existing. It's still the same permitting process. There's still the same building standards. Really what we're talking about is a difference in the gap between the fences, and I believe they've codified in the latest version that they have to be neutral colors, so that may take care of some of those concerns as well. One of the other concerns that I've seen is visibility or blocking someone's view, particularly around the lake. I've given you two pictures on the first page there. The top picture is the fence that would be allowed under the new ordinances. The second picture is the fence that is currently allowed. I don't think that there is enough of a difference between those two fences to say that one blocks your view of the lake and the other one does not. So I really don't see the argument there. And to further illustrate that point, the third picture there is something that is allowed, 25-foot tall evergreen trees. If anyone wants to block anyone's view of anything, they can plant those anywhere they want in their yard and block till their heart's content. So really the fence doesn't have much to do with it. The third thing that people have told me is that I could already build this fence, I would just have to go through the variance process. And that really leads into my third point. My reason for bringing this to the council is all about safety. And I don't believe that anyone should have to go through a variance process in order to build a safe fence around their yard. Honestly, we should be encouraging that, not making it more difficult and more expensive. The second slide gets a little bit into some of the details, or the second page. And just so we're clear, this is what we're talking about. The top portion, which would be concerning the fences that would be built in TGK with the height restrictions that we have, calls for a gap width of 1 3/4 inches as a maximum, so that a child can't fit their shoe in between those gaps. Now, the fence that is currently around our pool, our community pool, is compliant with the International Pool and Spa Regulations codes, but I couldn't build that fence in my yard under the current fencing regulations. If we make this change, I can keep the fence I've got that is compliant, and I can have a fence that is safe for my yard.
Is that the timer? Yep. Thanks, Jason.
Yes, sir.
Next is Mr. Mike Hall. Mike, you're at 916 Knob Creek Lane, right?
Yes, sir. Good evening. Thank you for having me to make these comments this evening. I do have actually as a request and a question, and I hope that this is the proper forum for this. I know that all of you are committed or have shown that you're committed to promoting commercial development in TGK. And my request to you is that when you're going through this process and searching for commercial developers, that you consider a couple things. First of all, their commitment to small businesses and the maintaining or the retention of a small business on their properties. Specifically when it comes to the rents that are paid for those properties that the developers own, that the small business person might want to rent out. Small businesses oftentimes have a difficult time staying in operation because the property owner will raise their rent and they'll have to move and sometimes have to go out of business. And when you go to these developers, and however this process works, if you can consider that in this whole process, as far as being small business friendly, for the most part. I believe personally that small businesses are the backbone of any community's economy and any nation's economy for that matter, and that we should try to see that these small businesses are protected to some degree. The other thing with your research and your process of going through finding developers, if you could try to put a face on these developers, and what I mean by that is if they would be local or at least regional, so that they have a commitment to the community. Oftentimes we have developers who come from who knows where, and they do not have the vested interest in the community that a local operation would. Of course, you would do that by finding out where they come from, where their home office is, if there are people that live in the community. Overall, my whole point here is that we try to, like I said, put a face on these developers so that they have a vested interest in the community. I must note here that I'm not a small business owner, nor do I really know anyone in this area who's a small business owner. This is strictly an ideological point that I'm trying to make here. My question that is not related to this is that, I don't know, and this is kind of a loaded question, am I the only person or the only guy in town that is bothered by the lack of progress in taking care of that burned out house on Gold Hill Road?
No.
Discussed it all the time.
I understand that it is York County property.
Yep.
And that there are only so many things you can do, but it doesn't seem like there's an acceptable answer to that question, other than this is an acceptable answer, as odd as it may seem.
Right.
There's nothing we're going to do about it.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Item number 3, approval of minutes. Everybody read the minutes? Been sent to any additions, comments, or deletions? Hearing none, minutes stand as they're written. Item number 4, the committee update. The Planning Commission, Chris Leonard, as he is stepping forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We've been trying to do these kind of regularly now, and I think we haven't been here since November, so apologies. But the point is, or the purpose is to try and update you on what we're working on, kind of our status of items that either have been passed on to us by you or that we've come up with that we thought were important, as well as try and set up a work plan for the calendar year 2018 that gets ready for the comp plan update that's coming in 2019. So that's what we're trying to do. First thing that we're working on that we got from council was, of course, the fencing regulation. We've reviewed the input from the public hearing. We've completed that process. That'll be presented as a recommendation, I think, the next item on the agenda tonight for first reading. So we'll talk about that in more detail then. The second thing that we got from council last fall was to look at short-term rentals, effectively Airbnb, which right now are prohibited in the city. And so we've been working on that for probably 4 months now. Excuse me. And we've been doing a lot of benchmarking of not only the local communities, but communities where this really is a vibrant kind of industry. Think Charleston, those kinds of places. We've kind of completed that. We found there's a wide disparity in how that industry is regulated by municipalities. And so we're kind of taking a very thoughtful approach to this because I think there's probably a wide spectrum of opinion. And so to that point, we're going to have a citizen survey that I think we'll launch on March 1st, Susan, to try and get some input from the citizens on what they think about that process. And with that input, which we hope to be able to digest in March, we expect to have some kind of a preliminary recommendation in the April timeframe. And that will probably encompass whatever we decide to do, as well as an update to the current regulations on bed and breakfasts in the city. That those regulations are a little outdated, and we would probably touch those as well along the same veins. So I think that'll be an April activity. We've also been working on a bike pedestrian master plan. And as maybe a little quick background, the purpose of that would be an addendum to the comprehensive plan that would guide the city in how we better provide bikeability, walkability, connectivity for the citizens through development, through budgeting, through planning and infrastructure design, as to how we improve our trails. And so what we've done on that is we've pulled together all of the existing trails and connectivity and pulled them into one spot into a single map so that we can look at what we've got, and we've started to overlay on that what we have approved or required developers to provide, as well as a kind of a 5-year view to what we would want to add to that. And so we've kind of completed that. We're working on language, policies, that kind of stuff. I would expect that we'd have something for council to look at March, April perhaps. Ultimately, I would expect that it would become part of the comprehensive plan update, so that really would be probably another year or so before that actually would become something that would be part of the city's comprehensive plan. And the last thing that we're doing, like I said, is trying to clear up some of the odd little things that might come up over the course of calendar 2018, so that we're ready for 2019 and the comprehensive plan update. And to that end, what we've been working on is looking at density requirements. You know, York County just changed theirs. We're looking to see if we should follow suit. No clear consensus yet, but we're looking at that. We're looking at our current planned development district requirements and York County's requirements, and see if we should change any of those as far as permitted uses, density, starting points, those kinds of things, as well as establishing a better checklist for staff to work with as they start negotiating with developers to perhaps be a little more in the city's favor. We're also going to look at maybe a little more of a strategic thing, looking at streamlining and combining our land use and subdevelopment and zoning ordinances into a single unified ordinance. I think that's a little bigger job. That might get us, you know, something at the end of this year, as well as looking at the current comprehensive plan to determine how we've done against strategies, see which other things need to be worked on before we finish the update. And that's kind of where we are with Planning Commission.
Anything else? Any
No.
questions?
Questions, comments, guidance?
Thank you. You might as well stay up there, because item number 5, unfinished business, Planning Commission recommendation regarding, let's see, item 5, let me get this real fast. Bear with me. Based on input received at the joint public hearing on January 16, 2018, the Planning Commission made the following revisions to the recommended amendments to the zoning code, Article 13, Section 19-401, fences in residential and park districts. Do I have to read this whole thing? Okay.
No, it's in your packets, and I think the
Yeah.
detailed ordinance is in your packet. But at our regular meeting on the 16th, we voted to recommend that the ordinance be changed in such a way to meet the Uniform Pool and Spa Code, as we talked about, remove the wording that required privacy fences, broaden the definition of neutral materials, but retain neutral materials, and has made the other changes that we had talked about previously as far as fence heights, and improved some wording in some other areas. So we voted to recommend that we move forward with that to first reading.
Thank you. With that, go directly to 5B. I'll entertain a motion. Yeah, go ahead and just entertain a motion first.
We're good. Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'd like to recommend the approval of an ordinance to amend zoning code, Article 13, Section 19-401, fences in residential parks and districts.
You on 5B?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's at the bottom, the
Yeah, it's
action.
It's not the recommended? I didn't have. a
No, it's the
computer
next one
in
down,
front
5B.
That's
We
what I
move
read on here. You go then. I mean, it's 5B.
It's just not on the main agenda. I can do it. Motion to approve the amendment to ordinance 77, section 19-401, fences in residential and park districts as presented. That one?
That works?
That's what, oh,
I have a
that's what you
motion
just
by
read?
I have a motion by Heather Oberman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ryan Richard. Are there any comments from the public before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that was unanimous. Item number 6, new business, appointment of committee liaisons. Here, we've got 3 committee liaisons we are appointing today. Alicia Dash is going to take over the planning. You've already been to one meeting, I think, right?
Yes, sir.
And Heather Oberman is going to take the economic development and the TK Forever. And so you let us know how that's going, and when we get our 4th council person, our 5th council person, we might adjust that accordingly. Okay? Item number 6B, approval of candidate for Economic Development Commission. Before we started, or after we swore, came in, we voted, there was 4 candidates. It was a unanimous choice, and Jerry Church won unanimously. He'll be our next candidate. He will be our next person on the Economic Development Commission. And with that, item number 7 is the city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Before I get into a couple things, I'd like to ask Chief Parker, as y'all are probably all familiar with Camp Cadet, it would not be possible with a lot of effort from a lot of different people, and Chief Parker wanted to take just a quick moment to recognize some of those folks.
Members of council, mayor, wanted to take a minute to recognize something that's been very successful but would not be successful without our key partners, and wanted to recognize those key partners today. One of the things that we have recognized is without the partnerships, this camp would not be where it is, and we continue to move forward. Want to individually recognize a couple of people and businesses. First, what I'd like to do is call up American Burger Company. Bobby, if you would come up, and I would also like to say that partner Robert, who Major Nelson had at one point gotten American Burger Company, their partnership has been incredible. They fed the golf tournament. They also have spent a day feeding the campers. And without them, we just want to thank them. I want to personally thank Bobby and what you've done. You've been outstanding. I appreciate everything you do. Here, right, we have a recognition for you and American Burger Company, and thank you for everything you've done. Would you like to say anything?
Yes, I would like to say thank you guys for giving American Burger a chance, and you know, we do anything that we can do to help you guys, and come on in. You're always welcome to our restaurant.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good hamburgers.
One thing I wanted to say before they leave is they're also partnering up with us on March 10th. We're going to feed the citizens of Tega for free and just ask for a donation, and that donation's going to go to Camp Cadet to help us continue to have a free camp for the kids. So thank you.
Chief, tell them where that's going to be.
It's going to be March 10th, and it's going to be actually at the police department. They're setting up tents there, and we're going to kind of just hopefully work through that process.
What time?
We're going to do it at 11 o'clock till about 2 o'clock.
Awesome.
Next, I'd like to call up Jersey Mike's Rob Bennett and thank him for what Jersey Mike's and their partnership. They've also fed the children, as well as his Brody came to the camp for a while, got sick, unfortunately, but was great. But wanted to thank you very much for your partnership and appreciate everything you do. And if you had something to say.
Roger, the owner, couldn't make it tonight, so I came on his behalf, and happy to be a part of the program. Yep. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And then wanted to also ask if Cliff Nichols would come up. Cliff has been a key part to this. He's supplied photography for the camp, as well as polar plunge and some other things, and we just appreciate his partnership with the police department. Thank you very much. Absolutely. Thank you very much for everything you do. And then last, and I'll finish, and it's definitely not least, Chief Scott Szymanski. I cannot say enough about how we have been able to be great partners together between the fire department and the police department. But we would not have this camp, and it would not be near as successful if it wasn't for Chief and his firefighters. They have been amazing. They were outstanding at the polar plunge, out there in the cold weather, cooking hot dogs. And also at the camp, we spend almost 2 days at the fire department, and it makes it incredible. And wanted to personally thank him for everything he does and ask him to come up. No, you come up. Thank you, appreciate it. Come on, get a photo with the policeman and fireman. Come on.
No speech?
We'll never do this again. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Chief.
you. Thank
All
you.
right, just a couple things for the report this evening. While we're talking police department, and Chief just mentioned the polar plunge. It was about 37 degrees outside that day for those that weren't able to attend. We had about 75 people jump in the pool. Raised over $17,000 for Special Olympics for South Carolina. So another great event. Looking forward to doing that again next year. Usually, about every spring, as we move into summer, there's seems to be a lot of chatter about Windjammer and things of that nature. So just wanted to bring up for the public's awareness. Beginning first week into March, you'll start seeing an increased presence patrolling Windjammer Park, primarily weekends, especially while school is still in session. Chief Parker, for those that aren't aware, we do have 4 patrol shifts, and in addition to their normal patrol duties and responding to calls for service, Chief Parker has assigned a focus area to each of those patrol groups. One of the 2 day shift groups is specifically assigned to monitor things at Windjammer as well as some of our other parks. So they will be hitting it very, very frequently. And then the others will still be patrolling down there as well. Our park maintenance staff, starting again that first week into March, we'll have park maintenance folks hitting Windjammer at least once a day, if not multiple times a day as needed, 7 days a week through the end of September. So we've heard the concerns and we're addressing those concerns, and we will monitor and adjust accordingly as we go through the summer months. So, one other new thing this year is Chief is going to have additional officers on holiday weekends and specifically holidays. In addition to our normal folks that are on patrol, both on the lake and in cruisers, keeping an eye on things. Holidays is usually when it gets a little sketchy as far as just total number of folks down there, folks without parking passes, things like that. But we'll also be doing some PSAs in the coming weeks and months, just reminding folks about the park rules, and that whenever there are large groups down there and you don't see parking stickers, doesn't mean that they shouldn't be down there, because we do rent out a portion of that facility pretty frequently. So just a quick update there. I know we had a couple of council members. I unfortunately wasn't able to attend, but Katie, our assistant city manager, did go to Hometown Legislative Action Day. And from everything I hear, y'all had a great time, and really glad that y'all were able to go. Which brings me to the next point, strategic planning with council. I have had a conversation with Randy Emler, playing phone tag with one of his staff members. We should be meeting next week, hopefully, to put together basically a scoping meeting on getting together probably sometime in May, once you've got a full council and everything, in a workshop retreat style setting. To basically talk about short and long-term goals and develop, really get a clear and concise vision from council. We'll have some staff members that will be participating in that as well. And it'll be a nice segue with the Planning Commission, as you heard from Chris Leonard about updating the comprehensive plan and things like that. And it'll also help staff as we begin really fine-tuning budgets for the 18-19 fiscal year. So we'll keep council updated accordingly as we start to finalize plans there. Let's see, 2 more things. Spring registration ended this year. 1,600 kids plus signed up for our youth sports. Our adult leagues saw an uptick, especially in our men's softball league. which is good. So this is probably the biggest season as far as sheer number of participants, both youth and adults, that we have ever had, and it is not going away. So kudos to our Parks and Rec staff for continuing to do a great job there. Just as a public service reminder, you're going to start seeing a lot more activities around the ball fields. Please slow down as you're driving through there. Kids sometimes don't look both ways. They're just excited to get to the ball field, so just be mindful of that as you are going through those areas. Last but not least, and this is just a heads up, out, I guess, that direction, out of the council chambers, the treat area above the 18 green and in between hole 18 and hole 10 is causing damage to that green. They can't dry it out after the snow that we had. All the snow had melted except for on that green. They had to actually shovel the snow off of that green to open back up. Tim Gillette is working with Chuck Smith, the golf course superintendent. They're going to start with just thinning out trees that are already compromised and we'll say not good condition. They've already got structural issues. Removing those things, it's not going to be a full clear cut thing, nothing like that, but there is going to be some selective tree removal through there to try to get it, a few more hours of sunlight to that green to try to protect that investment. That work will probably start up middle of next month. So just wanted council to be aware of that. Again, it's not going to be a full removal, but they've identified areas where they can capture some more of that morning sun to it, since they're really not going to be able to get that late afternoon sun. Right now, it's getting only about 3 hours of sunlight a day, direct sunlight onto that green. And if we don't get something done, we're going to end up losing that green. So just wanted council to be aware that work should be starting up here before too long. And Mayor, that's all I have for my report this
Quick
evening.
question, Charlie.
Yes, sir.
You had mentioned parking passes, enforcement,
sir.
things of that sort, and I had a couple of questions come to my attention with, as regards to golf carts. You're 50-50 on golf carts that have stickers or don't, just kind of taking making the extra effort. What's the definition and what's the focus as far as when our officers are looking for parking passes? Should we recommend to our golf cart owners to put a parking pass on their golf cart?
We do recommend it. A lot of them already do come
Yeah.
in. Obviously, for residents, the parking stickers are free. They just got to stop by City Hall, and if that's an issue getting there between business hours, shoot me or Katie Paulson an email. We'll arrange to get you the sticker. We'd like to have all vehicles, whether they're battery or golf carts or a full-blown SUV, like to have them all stickered. And you, just as a point of reference, you only need them at 3 facilities: Pitcairn, Windjammer, and the Beach and Swim Center are the only places where you if you're going to park there, you have to have the sticker.
All right, great, thanks.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions for the city manager? All right, move on to item 8, council comments. I'll start with Ryan.
I'm quick and easy. Obviously, I can't speak for all the council, but for me, having children in the Fort Mill school system, I 100% support the Fort Mill school bond referendum coming up at the end of this month. Obviously, we recommend all the citizens get out and vote, because we have an empty seat at the end that we'll be looking to fill, but vote yes, in my opinion. I don't know if I could tell you the way to vote, but 100% support the bond referendum to help support our children in their education. That's it.
Alicia?
Thank you. So I just want to take a minute and thank city staff for my new council member orientation guide. It was very helpful, and I know that it took some extra effort in putting it together, and so I
Special
appreciate
treatment.
you being responsive to my request and getting that done. So thank you, guys. Sorry. I echo Ryan in terms of just encouraging folks to get out and vote on March 20th. I as well will be having children at some point in the future, entering into the school system in Fort Mill. So I hope that there will be capacity by the time they get to that age. So the impact, the amount, if the impact fees do not go through, the amount for what we're actually getting that you'd have to pay is really not very significant. So to get 3 additional schools, that's amazing. And then the last thing, I just wanted to request to get an update on the funding from RFATs and how that was going to be reallocated, or what our options were in
Sure.
doing so.
We've actually got a meeting on Thursday with SCDOT officials about the 2 proposed project areas. One would be a sidewalk connecting from Stonecrest Boulevard down to Corabell, which is a cross street between Dam Road and Gardendale Road in Lake Ridge. The other would be extending the existing sidewalk that comes up from TK Drive up Molokai Drive on down, and our estimates look like possibly as far down as Pago Pago.
That's the one crossing the road, right?
Yes, sir. So we are meeting with SCDOT, one, to get their input and recommendations prior to it going to the RFAT's Policy Committee, to basically amend and shift those approved funds. Not asking for additional funds, but just to, instead of those going to the Windjammer project, as it was originally applied for, but to potentially fund these 2 projects. And just as a point of reference, SCDOT has to be the project manager on that, which means the pre-designed engineered cost estimates probably will increase by 25%, if not higher. It's just the way SCDOT manages the projects. They definitely get a lot more expensive, but DOT is also under federal highways guidelines that they have to follow, because ultimately that's where the money comes from. So it may be that we're only able to do one of those projects instead of both, but we're meeting with them on Thursday, and we'll definitely be able to provide a much more detailed report back to council probably sometime next week, but most certainly by your next council meeting.
And sorry, one follow-up question to that is, how were those 2 projects decided on?
Well, the Dam Road one is probably the most needed because that's where the gap is between in our, if you, I'll call it our trail system, whether it be trails or sidewalks. Basically, you can get from the fire station all the way through Serenity Point via sidewalk and or trail. From there, you don't have anything that connects you from a pedestrian standpoint to Lake Ridge and River Lakes. So we felt like that was a very high priority to be able to join those areas together. If you drive down Dam and Gardendale Road, there's a lot of people walking out in the street. We looked at several other areas, and realistically, the only places you really don't have sidewalks are in traditional TGK. Based on the sentiments we got and heard from folks on Windjammer, we tried to identify areas where we were still trying to connect neighborhoods to either business centers or parks or recreational type facilities that would need the fewest amount of encroachments and easements as possible from private landowners. In traditional TGK, the overwhelming majority, if not 100% of the front property lines come all the way out to the street. So being able to put a sidewalk behind the asphalt, we're going to have to get permissions from those folks. On Dam Road, it can be done within the Dam Road within the DOT right of way. So additional easements, encroachments, things like that aren't needed. On Molokai, there will be a couple. We looked at Point Clear. There's definitely some challenging topo towards the beginning of it. And there are a lot of driveway crossings where it would not make it down to Trident on Point Clear if we started up at the traffic circle, because a lot of money would end up having to go into driveway transitions as well as easement acquisitions. So we looked Point Clear, we looked at Marquesas, we obviously looked at Molokai. There is one other area, but we didn't see it as high of an impact as the 2 that we applied for, and that is a sidewalk on Heron Harbor from TK Drive down to the Heron Harbor Park, because we can do that on city property. But we felt like the 2 areas that we selected most certainly had a greater impact to more people as far as being able to use it and the need.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Heather?
I just want to echo what Ryan and Alicia already said. Thank you, Andrew and Michelle, for presenting tonight. As a product of two school teachers, as somebody who spent their entire career in higher education administration, and as a mom who has their first kid going to kindergarten in the fall, I really don't think that there's a more important investment in our community than our school district. A strong school district makes for an even stronger community, so I will be voting yes for the bond referendum on March 20th. And I hope that others in our community will as well. One thing that I did want to bring up, and this is mainly directed to the other members of council and to the mayor, one thing that I've seen is we've gone through kind of this new ordinance process, and I want to thank the Planning Commission and Susan Britt for all of their hard work. I'm sure they feel like a little bit of ping pong balls with us changing council in the middle of all of this and going back and forth. And so thank you for all of your time and effort. It does not go unnoticed. But one of the things that I want to bring up at least is the fee that we charge for our variances. I know that I've talked with Charlie about this, and I know that there is an administrative cost associated with it as far as putting those variance things out into the public, in the newspaper, mailings, and such. I just want to make sure that our fee isn't so high that we're deterring people from going that process. And I know Mr. Dayton stated that that wasn't necessarily the case for him in this instance. But I just want to make sure that we're giving people the opportunity to go through the proper approval and appeal process without deterring them from necessarily doing that with a fee that's so high that they're not even going to consider it. So just something I wanted to bring up to the other members of council as well, and something to think about possibly. Parks and Rec, I'm excited for the new season. We had our first soccer practice the other night, so kudos to them, and I know they always do a great job. And thank you, Charlie, and to the chief for being proactive on the Windjammer things that were coming up and putting a plan of action into place to make sure that our residents are safe going into those summer months on that street and at the park. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. I also have two children that were a product of the Fort Mill School District, so they're both very successful now because of the school district, I'm sure. Very proud of both of them. So, well, it sounds like we're all going to support it, and I guess we all would be in favor of a resolution from the council. Okay, we'll strike that up, and you guys can drive by whenever you want to and sign it. Doesn't have to be in a council session, right?
Council has to vote to approve a resolution.
All right, anybody want to make that now?
It's not on your agenda. We can bring it to you at your March 19th meeting.
Well,
Granted,
that's
it's
when's
the day,
the-
but March 20th is the vote. You do have one more meeting prior to that, but you couldn't vote to approve a resolution tonight based on FOIA laws.
All right, well, that's a bummer. Okay, anything else? Nothing for me? Anybody else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Bingo, we're down.